comfort and distractions of today collide to indulge our desires and provide a slow death by apathy. A superior primitive ethos exists. Prepare for tomorrow. Defend what you value and lead those you love. This mindset is the foundation of living an authentic life as a bold, disciplined man resolute in your mission. Prepare, defend, lead. Your mission. Own it.
All right, my name is Joe Prim, and I am the host of this podcast, Prepare.Defend.Lead. And I can't find my opening script anywhere. I waited kind of last minute to record this episode so that I could kind of be up to date on any crazy details that may have come to pass about this election. And I sat down to record, and I can't find my script anywhere. I am a note taker, so I have piles and piles and piles of notes. In fact, I've been going through notebooks so quickly lately for work that on a notepad, I'll fill out the front side, and then now I'm flipping the notepad over and writing on the back side of the papers just because I'm going through things so quickly. At some point here, maybe I will accept the digital age and get into note-taking in digital form, but as of right now, I've got notes everywhere. So it would take me probably a couple hours, or could take me a couple hours, to sort through all my notes on all sorts of different topics about all sorts of different things in order to find my opening script. But my opening script would have been something to the effect of, go to the new website, check out Prepare.Defend.Lead.com. From there, you can find the podcast. Obviously, you found it already from here. But on the website, you can find shirts and coffee mugs and stickers, that sort of thing, that help drive this podcast, help pay to keep this podcast going out there to you guys. I just dropped a new design of Remember the Alamo. We're kind of at a Remember the Alamo moment, I think, right now in our country's history. So even if you're a little curious, go check that out. You can follow me on social media, on Parler, on Instagram, and on Facebook. Basically, it's at Prepare.Defend.Lead. If you type that into the search bar, you should not have any problems finding me. Well, in this episode, the last couple episodes, we did interviews. I wanted to fly solo again here. And I think I will be flying solo again on these podcasts a lot more often. Ever Vigilant ended up at one point where it was a new guest every episode. And originally, and we'll get back into this a little bit more in this episode, this was about sharing my voice and my thoughts. And sometimes you get a real good interview. And rather than be an interview and you ask questions and somebody answer, it ends up turning into more of a conversation. And I love having those types of conversations where you're asking questions back and forth and getting people's ideas, people's feedback, trying to get out of people where they are and who they are and why they believe what they believe, because everybody has gone through different experiences in their life, so everybody looks at things just a little bit different, and you get different insights into reality based on the experience that other people have had. But that doesn't always happen. So in this episode and in future episodes where I feel like I want to share something, get something off my chest, kind of get out there and share my voice, share my experience, share what's going on with me, I'm going to do that. And we'll see how the ratings go. We'll see how the downloads go. We'll see. And you guys, feel free to DM me. Hit me up on Instagram or on Facebook or on Parler and say, hey, I really like the interviews better. Here's a guest idea. Or, hey, forget about doing the interviews. Fly solo as much as you can. I really appreciate what you have to say. Let me know what you think. I'm not going to say necessarily I'm going to follow your suggestions, but I will listen. I will always listen. So in this episode, I wanted to talk a little bit about my why. Who I am, what I'm doing here, sitting down in front of a mic on a Sunday night to record my thoughts. And I think that is relevant. I think that is very important. I want you guys to see where I'm coming from and why I'm here. There are a lot of people out there doing podcasts. A lot of really smart people. A lot of people with extremely different experiences than I have had. And they're out recording their thoughts, putting out excellent content that's challenging and encouraging and is dialed in the right way to get you to question things and to get you to strive to become better. And that's really the focus of what I want this podcast to be, is to focus on 3 categories, right? Preparing, defending, and leading. Because I truly believe that if we as men, and the women that are listening to this podcast as well, if we focus on those 3 things, preparing for tomorrow, that alleviates a lot of fear. And so much of what's going on in our world today is driven by fear. So if you're prepared for tomorrow, it means you've thought it through. You might not have everything perfectly set up, but you've thought it through. You've at least let those ideas run their course and set you into a place where you can help dictate and help write your future from where you are sitting today, right? So preparing for tomorrow, whether that be beans, Band-Aids, and bullets, or whether that be a retreat property, or whether that be building relationships with people. I think in the kind of prepper community, there's a real misunderstanding of the value of having other people that you can rely on. There's a lot of focus on self-reliance. And having spent 4 years plus on a property seeking to build a little homestead where we could be somewhat self-sufficient, it becomes very obvious very quickly that if I didn't have to do everything, if I could rely on neighbors to take care of this and friends to take care of that, and I could just focus my energy and time and money in one area, that would be a wiser way to do it. So community and building relationships is part of preparing is huge. And then defending, right? In defending goes off in 1,000 different directions. And at some point, I'll start working on the Prepare.Defend.Lead book after I finish Open, right, guys? And really get into the different dimensions of what that means. But just for quick sake today, we know defense means taking care of our family and protecting the things that we value, right? And putting a focus on understanding self-defense, but also at the same time, I think it's very important to make your home a place of safety and security. And this is something I've talked about a lot in the past, is the idea, the concept of changing your home into your castle, into your place of defense. It's not just a place to eat dinner. It's not just a place to eat TV, watch TV, or eat TV. But it's a place of safety. It's a place of security. It's a place where everybody is able to share what's going on with them that day. And of course, along with the love and the empathy comes some giving of a hard time in a loving way. But first and foremost, before that happens, there needs to be a true understanding of what it is to build that fortress, what it is to build your home into a fortress where everybody comes to that fortress and is recharged, is replenished, is refitted. Their weapons are sharpened, right? Their stomachs are full. They get rested up, where you come back to the safety of your fortress on a daily basis, and it is a place of renewal, a place of safety, a place of trust. And building that, it only happens through intention. It does not just happen by itself. True intention has to go into building that fortress in your home. And then leading. Boy, do we live in a world deplete of true, good leaders. And I think that, as I've said before on other podcasts and on Ever Vigilant, I truly believe that the hardest place to be a good leader, once again, is in your home. At work, I can tell people what I want them to do. I can threaten them and make them do what I want them to do. I can coerce them. When I tell an awful joke, there are still going to be guys that work for me that are going to laugh. Purely for the reason that I have a title and I am put in a position of authority. Not because it's funny. You tell a bad joke at home and nobody's going to laugh. And in fact, they're going to call me out on how awful of a joke I just told. And that's just one example of the differences between leading at home, where people really, truly know you. They've seen you with your outside mask off. They've seen you at the lowest lows. They've seen you at the highest highs. They've heard the embarrassing stories. They've seen you do things that you would not want anybody else to know about. They know you. In leading, truly leading people that know you and that you've been so vulnerable, whether intentionally or unintentionally around, is much more difficult than it is leading people in the workforce or outside in your community or in your church or other areas. So if you can build yourself into a true, strong leader that can get their family to follow after them, that can get their family to buy into what you're doing, what you believe, why you believe what you believe, and get you to buy into the fact that you truly love them, that you care about them, that they are important to you. If you can do that within the walls of your fortress, of your home, it's easy anywhere else. It really should be easy anywhere else. So that's kind of this podcast, the intent of this podcast in a nutshell, right? And as this podcast grows and as we move forward, we will touch back on those thoughts and maybe expound on those thoughts and keep those ideas growing and expanding as this thing moves on. But I kind of wanted to tell a little bit about my story. And then we'll get into lies. And the title of this podcast is The Truth Hurts, But Lies Kill. And I really want to get deep into that subject as well. But again, I think it's important as we're starting out this podcast that I lay an honest, true foundation of who I am and why I am here. So this kind of journey for me to becoming a guy behind the mic, of becoming a podcaster, is strange. It's ridiculous. And if anything, it really makes me laugh about the fact that people go to take tests or to find out what they would be good at or what they should do. Because any test that I would have ever taken would have said that I should not do this. I am an introvert. I am the guy who has absolutely no problem sitting in the back of of a class, sitting in the back row of a church service, and never saying a word, of not adding anything, and just be. And that, for me, that's my comfort zone. That's where I, for many, many years, hung out. And I was fine with that. I could control my emotions to a point where it would be very hard to know what I am feeling or what I am thinking until I get to know you. Once I get to know you, once we've spent time together, you'll probably glance over my way and have a pretty good idea of whether I'm talking or whether I'm not, of what I'm thinking. So, how did I come from that guy to this guy here right now? What's my why? Because there's got to be something more that gets me behind the microphone, paying for Spreaker, paying for microphones, paying for all these different things that I'm paying for as I'm starting out this podcast again. Why am I here? And the why that I'm here is through my story and through what I have to say. I want to encourage men out there. I see far too many men walking around with their heads down, their shoulders slouched, lacking confidence, not sure of why they are here, not sure of what they are supposed to be doing, not sure of where they're going. They are like a boat without a rudder. They're directionless. And the wind blows this way and they go off that way. And a storm comes and they bounce up and down. And then the nice sunny clear day and they just sit. And then the wind blows them in the other direction. And as a guy who lived life like that, I know how difficult it is. So here's my journey to where I am today. It kind of starts in about 2008 when the economy really started to tank. And I was working in construction in Chicago, and throughout 2008, we did pretty good. I kept busy. In fact, I was advancing in my career up to some higher echelon, better, more prestigious companies that I was working for in my craft. And early 2009, my daughter was born. It's our first child. We were living in a house a long ways away from Chicago. Because when we bought at the height of the market in probably 2007-ish, the end of 2006-ish, was at the height of the real estate market. And we had no intent on buying an expensive home. That was not our intent. We just wanted the 3-bedroom house, right? So we ended up buying that, but we bought that far away from Chicago in a subdivision that was in a county that was growing rapidly at that time. Of course, once 2008, 2009, 2010 rolled around, now all of a sudden our home was not worth nearly what we had paid for it. But shortly after, in 2009, shortly after my daughter was born, I got laid off. And I was laid off for probably around 6 months. And the funny thing is now I look back at those 6 months and I did absolutely nothing. I would once in a while call construction companies and we just tried to make it on unemployment. Obviously, that wasn't enough, and the bills racked up, the debt racked up, and we got more and more into a pinch. The beautiful part was I got to spend all day long with my beautiful newborn daughter, which was a priceless time that I fully enjoyed and am very, very grateful for. That time cost us a lot, but at the same time, as a new father, to be able to spend that time with this precious little bundle of joy and difficulty, really, because if it was just me and my wife at that time, the future looks much different when you're sitting home laid off with a mortgage that you're drowning in. But when now I have this responsibility in my hands, sitting on my lap or swinging in a swing next to me on a daily basis, as I do nothing with my time but make phone calls once a week and wait for a phone call that somebody needs me to work for them. And now I hear stories of so many people in 2008-ish, when that happened to them, they built what now are empires, with starting podcasts or started writing books or started doing things on YouTube. And at that time was early enough that breaking in was a little simpler, a little easier at that time, and they used their time wisely. I didn't. In fact, the thought never even crossed my mind. In fact, depression was probably tugging at my leg and pulling me into that cesspool, and it made it very difficult for me to see beyond the next day. So we ended up losing that home. My neighbor, he was able to talk to his mortgage company, and his mortgage company worked out a deal that helped him out, and he was able to keep his home. And we called our mortgage company, Wells Fargo, hoping that some way we could come up with some kind of agreement that would keep us in that home that we loved and had just had a second child in, my son, and they refused to work with us. And shortly after that, I was talking to my neighbor, and he said, yeah, you know how much they bought that house across the street for? And the house across the street, of course, in the subdivision, was just a mirror image of the house that I was living in, the house that we had picked out. In fact, we had looked at that house. Those were the only two houses available in that subdivision in that price range when we were looking. And we chose the other one across the street now had sold for about half of what we had paid for our home. And it came to the realization that trying to struggle and trying to fight to keep this worldly possession, to keep this home, was not worth it. And we decided that we would do a short sale. When we made that decision, I did not realize how difficult or how traumatic that was going to be for me. My wife pretty much breezed through that as long as she knew she was getting a new home, no matter what it was, because at that time, from there, we moved into just a very, very small quad with a shared driveway, no yard whatsoever, moving away from what I had felt like was a great, let's just say, I imagined that home was one of the things to mark off the list as I moved my way up through life. And when I lost that home, and the most difficult day as that was going on was we knew we were going to be moving into a much, much smaller place, and we could not fit all the furniture that we had in our home into this new townhouse. So I started moving things out onto the curb and watching my neighbors sort through and pick through my stuff and load my stuff that I was still probably trying to pay off on credit card bills, and some of it that I had paid for out of my own pocket. See them load that furniture up into their vehicles to drive them off into their house was gut-wrenching for me. I felt like the biggest failure in the world. I lost my house. I failed my 2 kids. I failed my wife. I felt like and I lost this house, which was something, again, like I'm trying to come up with the right words to use, which was a big prize, right? You go to work every day, you seek out to have these markers in your life, these milestones of getting that first house with your wife, and then to have kids there, and then to lose it. I felt that I had failed my wife. I felt that I had failed my kids, and it put me into a very, very difficult spot. So we moved out of there, moved into this little townhouse, and my addiction of choice at that time was video games. Now, a lot of you out there, maybe that's an issue for you. Maybe it's something you've never thought of that could be an addiction. But it very much ended up being an addiction for me. It was my place where I could sedate, where I could hide, where I could go off into another world and not face what I had going on in reality, right? I could go into another world and be in the mafia. I could go into another world and fight zombies. I could go into another world and be fighting aliens, right? So it was my escape. And I was back at work, so I would be working my 8 hours and working hard and advancing and getting better and advancing and getting more respect from my coworkers and them understanding that they could rely on me and who I was and my skills in print reading and layout and that sort of thing. And then on Friday night, as soon as my wife and kids were in bed, it was on till 2, 3 in the morning playing video games. And then it would be the same thing on Saturday night. Hardcore into the video games. And then sometimes on Saturday, sometimes on Sunday, maybe a little bit, but probably not because I wanted to spend the time with my kids. But those 2 nights, I sedated myself so I could forget where I was at by diving into those video games. And for some of you guys that are out there that are gamers, maybe you get it. But I don't remember what year it was. Probably like 2011, 2012-ish, something like that. And I beat like 25 or 30 games. Just playing through start to finish. Video game achievements were a true addiction for me, so I would roll through those games. I'd go back sometimes, get as many achievements as possible in those games. And that was where I put my time and my energy and my focus was into these achievements that in the real world meant nothing, but to me at that time meant a lot. That year where I broke the record for myself of beating so many games, my wife went to bed on December 31st at 10:30. I threw in a video game. I think it was probably Resistance on the PS3, and played that game and beat that game 5 minutes before midnight so that I could say I added that game to the list. I took this seriously. This was not gaming for fun. This was not a diversion for me. This was something I took seriously. In fact, that year, I was playing so many games that I had to abandon my Xbox 360 because there was nothing left on the Xbox 360 that I had any desire to play. Of all the video games out on the market, there was nothing left that I had either not played, not beaten, or wanted to play. And ended up buying a PS3 so that I could play the exclusive titles that Sony had. And then I rolled through those as well. Now, maybe some people would look at it and say, wow, video games are at the very least not quite as destructive as a habit, or not quite as destructive of behavior as many other addictions. And that might be true. But when you're pouring your energy and your focus into something that has no real life, no real tangible thing, when it's actually nothingness, it's not a new skill, it's not a new relationship, it's not a new goal, that's something you can hold on to, at some point, and it was way before I got to my point, it's not just something that you're doing for fun. It's something that you're investing in. It's an addiction. No other way I can say it. So at some point in there, I started to realize that, is this really it? I'm in my 30s here. I've reached my goals at work. People respect what I do. I work hard. I put in my efforts. I've already lost a home. I feel like I failed my wife and my kids. I'm sedating myself and hiding in video games on the weekends. Is this it? Is this what I have to look forward to for the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years? And in my area of the trades, installing millwork, I worked with a lot of older guys. No matter how old I seemed to get, I was always the kid. I was always one of the young guys on the crew. And they would constantly be talking about retirement. When I retire, when I retire, when I retire. And everything in their life, everything of value, everything that they wanted to do always seemed like it was on hold until they retired. So I'm in my 30s, and I'm looking at this going, really? Really? I got 30 plus years left of this till I get to do what I want to do? Till I am free to leave or move or try something new or do something different? And I decided, no, I'm not going to play that game. I am not going to play that game. And I started, at that point, I started praying. Probably the first thing I started doing was praying for wisdom. And some of you guys out there, faith might not be your thing. It might not be your thing to go to church. In the Bible, it says that if you pray for wisdom, that God will answer that prayer. So, in faith, I started praying that prayer. And I started seeing things differently. I started looking at things that were going on in the news. I started looking at things that the way that people had always done things at work. And I started to see things just a little bit differently. And I started listening to some audiobooks. For years and years and years, I had been a huge Chicago Bears fan. Huge. I mean, I would watch all 4 quarters of the preseason games. All 4 of them. And I would make fun of or look down on the guys that didn't. I was that guy. I would follow what was going on exactly in training camp. I knew guys' stats. I knew what guy wore what number jersey. I knew it all. So, of course, what did I listen to? I listened to sports radio every day on my way home from work. Day after day, year after year, I had been listening since I was a teenager. But I realized, what am I doing? What am I learning if this is all I'm going to listen to, the same thing day after day? Is we're critiquing interceptions and versus incomplete passes versus first downs. And I'll be honest with you, probably when I started going this direction, it probably was during the summer. And they were probably talking baseball or basketball, and I probably wasn't as interested in it had it been fall and we were talking football. But at some point in there, I started to realize that if I'm going to change things here, I've got to start to reach out there and educate myself in different things. And I started listening to some audiobooks, and I started listening to some podcasts, started listening to the Survival Podcast with Jack Spirko. And I started listening to Dale Carnegie's book, How to Make Friends and Influence People. And these books, to me, like that book was just groundbreaking because it was simple. It was clear ways of how to communicate with people, of how to listen, of how to get people to do what you wanted them to do by treating them with respect. And again, most of these things that I was hearing in this book were things that I did, were ways that I conducted myself, and they were ways that helped me to have the success that I had had in my trade as a carpenter, and helped me grow into the position that I was in. But hearing somebody speak them was different. Recognizing them in myself changed things. And recognizing that there were more things, that there were different things, that there were other ways that I could grow myself and grow my relationships with others blew my mind. I had never thought or looked at things that way. So somewhere along the line, I got to a point or listened to a podcast or heard somebody and they were talking about changing morning routines. So I got into that. Started getting up earlier. Started working out. Started spending some time reading the Bible. Started spending time reading other books. Started spending time praying. And one day when I was in meditation and praying, the word open came to me. Felt like the voice, felt like God was saying to me, you need to be more open. It's like, what in the world does this mean? You need to be more open. I started to think about it, and it's like, okay, that makes sense. I do realize that in the past 6 months now, or the past probably was only 6 months, maybe 4 months, something like that, maybe a year, I have been more open. I've been more open in my mind. I'm opening up my mind. And I started walking myself and talking myself through this idea of open. I said, okay. I'm seeing that these other people that are helping people, these books that I'm reading, these podcasts that I'm listening to, these books that I'm listening to, people break them down and give people small chunks of something that has much deeper meaning, that you can go much deeper with, but are easy concepts to grasp, but very difficult to master. And as I started to ponder open, I realized, okay, number one, we need to open our mind. Okay, that seemed to make sense to me. Yep, I've been opening my mind. That has made a big change in my life as I've opened my mind. I got to thinking, okay, open my mind. How about open my ears? Have I been opening my ears? Am I opening my ears? Yeah, I have been. I've been opening my ears. I've been listening to podcasts. I've been listening to different audiobooks. I've been trying to listen more to what my wife is saying and what my kids are saying. Okay, that makes sense. So now this idea of open, I got to open my mind. I have to be able to open my ears. And then, okay, open my mouth. Yeah. You might need to use a little bit of discernment there. But yes, definitely open your mouth. That's going to go on this list. We got to have that. What else? What are another senses? Open your eyes. Yeah, open your eyes. 2 reasons why we need to open our eyes, right? We got to open our eyes, number 1, to see the beauty of God's creation around us. That relieves stress. That helps us to be grateful for where we're at. Yeah, open our eyes. But we also need to open our eyes to the evil around us, the potential threats. We have to pay attention. We have to be situationally aware. And then I started, as this day was going on, I kept on thinking of this idea of open and what I need to, areas in my life that either I was being more open in or areas where I needed to be more open in. And I realized as I got to thinking, I need to open my heart. This is an area where I struggle, where I don't do real good, but I need to open my heart and be more honest with my wife and with my kids. I need to be able to not just have a surface relationship with them. It needs to be deeper. I really need to open up my heart to them. And then I thought, okay, so we got the senses kind of taken care of here in the open, and I got to open myself up personally to have a better, deeper relationship with the people that I really care about. What about other people? Yeah. Got to open my arms. I got to open my arms to build relationships, to build brotherhood, to build camaraderie with people that I don't even know right now. And I realized, wow, okay, so some of these I'm doing really well in. I'm opening up my mind, for sure, no doubt about that. Nobody could argue that one at that point. That one's a given. So I'm starting to go down this list. And this list starts to become a prayer. This list starts to become something that I think about as the day goes by, and something that encouraged me as I was trying to get myself out of this difficult position, as I was trying to get my foundation built around me of this new way of looking at things, as I started to try to dig some steps with a shovel to get myself out of the cesspool that I was in of depression, of frustration with myself, of feeling like I was a failure, of hiding in video games. And I started, okay, opening up my mind, definitely doing that. Opening up my mouth, yeah, it's maybe even sometimes too much, right? But I'm opening up my mouth so that I can share these ideas that I'm hearing, these ideas, these thoughts that are coming to me by opening up my mind. I'm sharing them. Opening up my heart, okay, that's something I definitely got to work on. Opening up my arms, for sure, something I got to work on. Opening up my ears, opening up my eyes. So as I started to get these ideas, this concept, and started to formulate this, I felt like, you know what? This is something that I need to write a book on. But at that point, I'm still this broken down guy. Just struggling to understand, just struggling to get my mind wrapped around some of this stuff. And I thought to myself, that's ridiculous. You have no business even thinking about writing a book. There is no way in the world, Joe Prim, that you could be an author, that you could write a book on these 5 ideas. And I took that and I said, okay, yeah, you know what? You're right. I have absolutely no idea how I would even begin this book. I have no idea where I could get this book out to publish it. I have no idea how I could do any of that. And a different idea popped in my head. Bing! But you know what? You could do one of these podcasts. You know, these podcasts that you listen to every day on your commute? You could do one of those. In fact, Jack Spirko started his survival podcast on his commute to and from work every day. I thought, you know what? That'd be cool. I could do 6 episodes and be done. I could do an episode introducing myself. I could do an episode on open my mind, an episode on open my mouth, an episode on open my ears, an episode on open my arms, open my heart, a review episode, and be done. This burden, this idea, that fact that I needed to share this would be off of my back, and I could focus back on other things. So that's what I did. Other than that's not where it ended. In fact, although very, very sporadic to begin with, Ever Vigilant continued on for another 3 or 4 years. And in those 3 or 4 years, I think we racked up like 34,000 downloads, which, when you compare it to other podcasts, granted. But when you compare that to a guy who really only wanted to put out 6 episodes, a guy who wasn't even really sure or certain about doing that, I think it was quite an accomplishment. But what I learned through doing that podcast is where the real value comes from. Finding guests, learning how to ask questions, learning how to build relationships, learning how to have the confidence week in and week out to turn on the microphone and share my ideas and my thoughts. Sometimes only a few people downloading, sometimes a few more people downloading, trying to figure out what worked and what didn't, and what people wanted to hear and what people didn't want to hear. And what changed in me out of that risk, out of saying, you know what, I have something here in this idea of open. I have something worth sharing. I have an idea here. I have a concept here that I think could help other men that are stuck in the same situation that I am, that are grasping for something. They're grasping for something to boost them, something to hold on to, something to give them some sort of direction, some way of repairing that rudder on the back of their small boat to keep them from drifting wherever the wind and the storms in life are going to take them. So although at that time my commitment was not big, my commitment was to do very few episodes. My commitment was to throw that out there and say, hey, it is what it is. I shared my idea. I shared this with the world. Where it goes from here, not up to me. Of course, along the way, things changed. I kept the podcast going. We did some episodes talking about homesteading and then for a long time turned into a podcast where I had guests on every single episode. And again, constantly growing. And although the podcast Ever Vigilant never really grew into what I wanted it to be, I grew each and every episode. I grew each and every day that I was planning and thinking through and learning how to convey my thoughts, learning how to take an idea that's been doing flip-flops around in my mind for a week or two to be able to then verbalize that message, that idea, and bring it out there so other people could comprehend it. That doesn't happen until you spend hours behind the mic. I hate talking to people. I hate the idea of meeting new people. But because of that, I have to work extra hard to do this and to have become proficient at it. And do I have a lot to learn? Do I have a long way to go? Oh, yes, I do. But every other word out of my mouth is not a or an ah anymore. And when you remember back to those days when you were just first starting out, trying to convey a message, trying to get people to understand what the open concept was doing in your life and how they could use that into their life, or even trying to convey message about what was going on in the homestead and why we were moving out into our little homestead, our little 2.5 acres, why we were doing something like that. But while you're trying to figure out a way to get other people to understand that, you're also spending a lot more time with that thought yourself. And when you're spending a lot more time with that thought yourself, you're developing it, you're building it, you're getting a better understanding of what makes you tick, why you're doing the things you're doing, and what your risk tolerance is. So that should give you a pretty good idea of why this endeavor, why this experiment of me even being behind a mic, why that came to be. It came to be out of a simple idea to share a very simple concept, a very simple idea that I thought could help direct men out there to become better husbands, to become better fathers, to become better leaders in their churches and in their communities. That was why it started. From there, it has grown. From there, my ideas, my goals, where I want this thing to go, now that we started back up with this new podcast, has changed. Those ideas have gotten bigger. I think the issue and the problem has become more and more obvious to me. And we got a long way to go. We got a lot to do. I finally do. I'm working on getting Open out there in a book form. I started on that earlier this year. It's been a struggle. It's not been easy for me, but it's a struggle that's growing me. It's a struggle that's challenging me to go back to the open concept here and make it what it needs to be, to clarify it, to clean it, almost like where you put the gold into the fire, right? And they put the gold into the fire, they heat it up, and then they scrape off the top of the gold because the bad stuff rises to the top, and they scrape off the impurities, and then they heat it up again, and they keep on doing that till they end up with the most pure gold. Now, am I saying my book is going to be gold? No, I'm not that bold at this point. But that is the effort that I'm trying to put in. That is my desire, is to put something out there in book form as well as in the old podcast form that people can use as a prayer, as something to meditate on, as a guide to a few different areas. And as it says, I say with the title of the book, six concepts that are easy to understand but very hard to master. So let's get into this other topic as we're rolling into 50 minutes here already in this podcast. Truth hurts, lies kill. Now, this whole concept, this whole idea of lies was something I've been thinking about lately before this election took place. So this idea of lies is something I've been thinking about. And then there's another concept that I've been thinking about. And the other concept I've been thinking about was this idea of the potential for a color revolution type event in our country. Now, a color revolution is what they call when usually the CIA and NGOs, non-government organizations, conspire and work together to nullify or to discredit an election in another country. Now, if you've looked at the history of the CIA and our involvement in other governments, it's filled with these stories of governments being overthrown, and one of the best times to do it, obviously, is during an election. And really, the biggest goal in the last years where this has happened is just to give some kind of doubt, just to place some kind of doubt on who won the election. And then from there, you get the courts involved. From there, you get outside countries, the political leaders from outside countries to get involved, and you force things to have the outcome that you want them to have. So that's what a color revolution is. That's something that I had been thinking about. That is something that I had been expecting to happen with this election, presidential election. Something that I was praying and hoping would not happen, but something that appears to have happened. And then on the other end, I've been thinking about this idea of lies. And in Christian circles and in conservative circles, there's a real disdain for the idea of people having their own truth. Because we like to go back to the fact that, no, there is only one truth. And while I agree that there is only one truth, everybody does have their own truth. Their own truth is built by the information that they have received, by the environment that they live in, and by the influence of the people around them. Now let's look at that again. So your truth, and again, it's your truth. It does not have to be the truth. It does not have to be real. It does not have to be rooted in any sort of fact or truth whatsoever. It is your truth. But nonetheless, if it is your truth, you believe it just as strongly as people on the other side. Right? And that's why I've talked about in the past about with COVID and wearing masks. For those people that wear masks regularly, and I still see them driving around in their cars, windows up with a mask on, that is their truth. There is a deadly pandemic that is looking to take their life or the life of somebody that they love. So that is their truth. So I want to go back to one more time. I want to reiterate this understanding of why each person has their own truth. That truth is given to you, or that truth that you have, that you hold on to, is from the information that you have been given. Right? So what information are people given? It can be social media, government schools, government TV shows, and from your environment, right? The neighborhood that you grew up in, the state that you grew up in, the country that you grew up in. Those all play a part in what your truth is. And then how easily, maybe, but at the same time, the influence of different things in your life. For some people, the influence might be a great sports star, right? Somebody that they really respect on the field, and because of that respect on the field, that person has some sort of influence into their beliefs in politics or their beliefs in other areas and other things that are happening because that person has influence in them. Same with politics, right? People follow after certain politicians, and because of that, the message that that person is sharing influences their opinion, influences their truth. So I'm thinking in my mind, I'm really thinking about and trying to understand lies then, right? Because if each person has their own truth is based on the information that they have, right? It shows you how important honesty is. Because no matter how small, no matter how minute a lie is that you tell, whether it be something you tell to yourself or you tell to other people, the effects of that lie down the line can have traumatic events because you are building the truth of someone else's life. Now, at the time, or as you look at it, you may not think that that can have much of an impact. But over time, and because we do not completely understand how stories are told, how stories are retold, we do not know how great of an impact we can have on this world and people's truth by the lies of commission or omission or exaggerations that we tell. We know for sure that the lies that we tell ourselves have a huge impact on us, right? It's okay, have that other donut. It's all right, sleep in this morning. It's all right, you don't need to go on that run. It's all right, it's a Diet Coke, right? Those are lies we tell ourselves all day long. And what have been the effect of those lies on you? You know, they have studies that say that if you tell your kid regularly that they are clumsy, that they will start to identify themselves as being clumsy, and then every time that they trip, or every time that they stumble, or any time that they slip on the ice, they will revert back to their truth that they are clumsy. Whereas they're not falling or tripping or stumbling or slipping on the ice any more often than anybody else. But their truth is that's because they're clumsy. And these things begin to beat down and wear down on people because that's their truth. But really what I also want to get into here as these two ideas of the necessity for real truth and not lies, and the idea of an election being stolen is what lies in between there. What lies right now in this country, in this world that we live, between people's truth and something like a color revolution being possible in the United States of America. And what is it? It is the media, and it is social media. Now, if you had asked me in the past what I thought about government regulating social media, I would have said, I don't really think that it's necessary for a government to regulate one more thing, right? I would love them to deregulate everything. But the reality is, like I talked about a few episodes ago, we need to accept the reality of where we're at, and then we can come up with solutions to our problems. And where we are at right now, with social media and a media that can completely has control and can completely write people's truths for them, can completely write the narrative, can completely dictate the direction, the opinions, the thoughts of a tremendous amount, the majority of people in a country or in the West. Those people have altogether too much power. And there is, for me, at this point now, the government needs to get in there and regulate that. Is that a super great solution to the problem? The government regulates everything, right? They regulate Ford and how much miles per gallon. They regulate Chevy. They regulate 1,000 different industries, from industrial to farming to construction. They have regulations to keep people safe and to keep bad things from happening. Does it always do that? Is the bureaucracy what we want? No. But on the other end, what are the consequences? What are the consequences of allowing certain organizations, certain companies, and certain people the power to completely write other people's truth? Because these people that believe this stuff, their feed on Facebook is different than your feed on Facebook. Their feed on Instagram and their ads on Instagram are different than your feed and your ads on Instagram. So their truth is completely different than theirs, than yours. It's not that they're idiots. It's not that they're hard-hearted. It's not all these things that make it easy for us to say these are bad people, right? Much, much easier on us as humans to just say black, white, right, wrong, right? Green light, red light. It took years to adopt the yellow light. It's kind of funny, right? We like things that way. But we have to realize that people are being manipulated. And I tend to believe that there are those that seem to end up on the right side, are those that are much more likely just naturally to question things, to look at things and wonder why things are the way they are, to wonder why something works the way it works, to wonder how they would start a business or how they could make a business run, because you see a lot more entrepreneurial people on the right, a lot more business owners, a different type of people that go against everything that they have heard or been taught growing up through government schools and through Sesame Street down to everything, right? So you have a group of people that are on the right that are just tend to kind of be people that question everything. And then you have people on the left that seem to be more trusting and more believing in what they want to be trusting and believing in. So now we come to a point where we have a system that's not very regulated, that's allowed to completely control people's truths, completely mess with people's lives in a way that they rewrite what is true for that person. They took it upon themselves to write a narrative so that people would believe it. And an example of this, of why because I don't want to confuse people's truths for the real truth, so we'll just hit on that Russiagate for a minute, right? For many, many people, that was their truth. They were told over and over that something was going to come out of that Trump was going to be in big trouble, and for them, that was their truth. Their truth was Trump was bad. He had colluded with Russia to win the election. He was a bad man. He's Putin's puppet. And that was their truth, because that's what they were told over and over and over and over and over and over again. Every day on Facebook, that's what they were told. So that's what they believed, and that became their truth. But when that stuff came up to legal scrutiny, Mueller couldn't find anything. He couldn't do anything with it. It went nowhere. After 2+ years of investigation, it went nowhere because there was no validity to it. So there is a distinction between other people's truth and the truth. But your truth is still your truth. Each and every one of us at this moment is believing in things wholeheartedly, completely, that are false. It's a hard thing to grasp, and it's a hard thing to admit. And what they are at this moment, I don't know. But if we can't be honest with ourselves and look for them and flush them out, then we have a problem as well. But so you have this one idea, this idea of lies, and the importance of being honest. Because, like I said, the truth hurts sometimes, but lies kill. So you have this idea of lies, and you have this idea of perhaps a color revolution happening in this great country that I happen to have been born in here in the United States, right? We got listeners from around the world, so don't want to only have this concept to be identified or understood by the Americans that are listening. But so you have this idea, but then in the middle, you have the people that are dictating that are causing that chaos, that are causing that disconnect, that are causing that division between two sides. And I believe that we need to do something in order to try to regulate that. Now, where do I see things going with this election? Like I said, I had been talking about and thinking about this color revolution idea for quite some time. And I thought that this was probably the direction that it was going to go in. I really hoped and prayed that that was not the case. But that is where we find ourselves. And once again, I'll go back to, we need to accept where we are in order to come up with strategies, ideas of not only how we can change things to benefit us, but also how we can accept things in order to move forward. And we will see where things go. I can make some predictions. I have some ideas. I think it's really telling how many Republicans are remaining silent on this issue. I think that there were many of them that have not liked Trump for the last 4+ years and would have no problem sitting idly by while this election is robbed from him. Now, at this point, I can say robbed because that's my truth. That's my thoughts on this. But there's one way to find out whether my truth is correct, and that would be to recount the votes, to look back through everything, to make sure all legal votes were counted, but nothing else. But what's interesting is you have people on another side who argued for 4 years, that Russia influenced election, that now don't believe that there's any such thing as lying or cheating on an election. But this is another lesson. You have to understand and accept when you're fighting against somebody who is not going to fight fair, that things change. You have to look at things differently. You have to strategize differently. You have to look at things in a different way when they're not playing the same game as you're playing. And I think far too many people in the Republican Party, elected, I should say, will just sit idly by and, if anything, try to slow down any litigation on recounting of ballots. The real telling part, the difficult part to decipher out, is what the reaction will be from the right. Now, up until this point, the people on the right have been boisterous and loud in their support of Trump, but beyond that have been relatively peaceful group of people. Unless the Supreme Court looks at this and has very clear-cut evidence that Biden is in fact the winner, I think it will be a very hard sell for the people on the right. And part of the reason that I say this, and the real reason I come to this conclusion, is many people on the right, their truth has been, and I believe the truth is, that they have been censored, that they have been unfairly removed off of social media platforms, that they have been silenced in their viewpoint, that their thoughts and ideas are being censored. And when you take away people's free speech, it's a bad thing. When you take away people's free speech and you take away their ability to have fair and open elections, you're not leaving people very many options. And at some point, maybe we'll get into this topic in a bigger way, but this idea comes back to redress of grievances, which it talks about in the Constitution, and even talks about way, way, way back to the Magna Carta, is the necessity for citizens to be allowed redress of grievances. Which redress of grievances is basically saying that people need to be able to feel like they're being heard, that their ideas, their grievances, their issues are being fairly listened to, and maybe in reality, maybe things don't go the way that they want them to go, but you need to give the people the sense, the idea that their thoughts and ideas are being, their concerns, more than anything, are being listened to. And if they are deemed a issue or a problem, that they will be addressed. The reason why this is so important, and I've talked in the past about this, is why it's so important that you allow your children that same idea, the redress of grievances, to share why something happened the way it happened, is that when you don't allow redress of grievances, you sow rebellion. And when people feel like their freedom of speech is being censored, when they're being shut up, when you have people start to feel like, on top of that's bad enough, but we're going to get our guy in there elected, and then things seem to go sideways with an election that seems unfair and seems like there was a lot of cheating going on, and their reaction is, we would like to have this investigated. Not asking for anybody to be hung, not asking for anybody to be taken out back to the whipping shed, not asking for anybody to necessarily at this point be thrown into jail, but saying, hey, we believe that at the very least we are owed some sort of recount, some sort of looking into this, because we have concerns, right? This is our grievance. We would like to have it addressed. And if that doesn't happen, or they don't feel that it happened the way that would be fair, that would be right, that would be in an open way. Where we go, and this very well may be the intent, where we go from there is at this point anybody's guess. Where we go from there is anybody's guess. And those that have been out in the streets up until this point, those that have been creating chaos and creating problems and violence and destruction, my guess is those people may very well be at the top of the list. Those people may have the brunt of this taken out on them. Where we go from there, from that point, the difficulties, the chaos, the destruction is not a place I think any of us wants to go to, is not an idea any of us really want to let play out in our minds. But again, we go back to the focus of this podcast. Prepare, defend, and lead. These are the things our grandfathers, our great-grandfathers, our great-great-great-great-great-great-grandfathers focused on. Preparing for tomorrow, defending what they valued, and leading those they loved. That's your mission. That is your mission. Prepare, defend, and lead. That's your mission. Own it. If you have questions, if you have comments, hit me up on Instagram. That's where I'm most active. You can also hit me up on Facebook. I'm on there from time to time. Parler, I'm just starting out on. If you're interested in joining up, I think it is a good move to join Parler. If those people that you support are getting kicked off of social media, those people that you value their viewpoint, you value their ideas, then why are we still playing around on Twitter? Why are we still there? The majority of people on the right, people that are conservatives, are starting to move in that direction towards Parler. They have made some great strides in becoming a better place. I also have a page on locals.com. You can find me there again. Prepare.Defend.Lead. What I'm going to do with that exactly, I'm not sure. But at this point, I think that we need to be looking for other options to accept where we're at, like I talked about in that past episode, and move forward with new ideas, new strategies, new ways of looking at things, and instead of stubbing our toe on that board that we just won't put another nail in. Right? You got that floorboard that's sticking up, and every time you walk by, you stub your toe on it. Take a couple minutes, put a nail in it, and solve the problem. I appreciate you guys listening. I hope that this podcast helps some of you guys out. If you guys got questions, like I said, questions, comments, hit me up in the DM section on Parler, Instagram, or Facebook, and I'll be back next week. Until then, hold fast, and God bless.